Judging from what you tell me, and from what I hear, I feel that you show great promise. You do not dare from place to place and unsettle yourself with one move after another. Restlessness of that sort is symptomatic of a sick mind. Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company. That's how my edition of Letters from a Stoic starts. I have tried to make this video 4 or 5 times, but every time it just devolves into a lecture on Stoicism, which is absolutely not what I want this to be, and it's why talking about this stuff is difficult. But I think I've got it figured out now. Where here's going to be the general structure. I'm just going to talk about this book and that book. I'm going to tell you about the style. I'm going to tell you about the people. I'm going to tell you about why this stuff matters to me and how it came into my life. And then I will finish off by trying to just give some examples of some of the ideas in these books and why I like them. And that should be a structure that doesn't devolve into chaos, but we'll just have to see. So let's start with this one. I just read the first paragraph of Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. Seneca was an ancient Roman dude. He was hired by a young emperor's mother to basically guide him, the same way that Aristotle guided Alexander the Great and was his tutor. That young emperor was Emperor Nero, who went on to murder his mother and be one of the most villainous characters in all of human history. So maybe Seneca didn't quite do the job, or maybe it was just doomed to fail, who knows. When Nero was young and wasn't really up to ruling, or I don't know if he was rejecting his power or whether he was just too young, Seneca basically ruled most of Rome with another Roman general, and life was pretty good in Rome. So even though he'd never been elected, even though there was nothing official granting him these powers, everyone was kind of happy just to look the other way because Rome was doing well, Rome was flourishing. As for that other book, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius was the 5th of the 5 good emperors of Rome. And he was, Plato talked about one whole chapter of Plato's Republic, one of the iconic works of philosophy, is on the philosopher king, the ideal ruler who rules based on philosophy. And that is really exemplified in Marcus Aurelius, which is obviously well after Plato, but he did rule well. But similarly to Seneca, he didn't pass it on well, and his son ended up being not a very good emperor. The reason that I started with Letters from a Stoic is because I started from Letters from a Stoic. It's the first book I read from Stoicism. And maybe it was just the bias of reading it first, and the fact that they share very common ideas, and they weren't really as stellar and unique and exciting and new to me reading Aurelius. But I much prefer Letters from a Stoic. I think a lot of that might be to do with the format. These are letters from Seneca to Lucilius, who's just a younger man trying to make his way in the world, and Seneca kind of takes him under his wing and just gives him advice, and these are long personal letters to a friend, and so they're very warm, and you can tell that they have best intentions, unlike other pieces of philosophy. This isn't someone trying to say, this is how the world is, I am right, and not trying to make some big thesis. It's just guidance and advice, and I think that format is so accessible and easy to engage with. Meanwhile, Meditations are basically excerpts from a diary. They are little things that Marcus Aurelius wrote, never really with the intent of publishing. I think it was published well after his death, and they were just kind of collected sayings. And so it didn't have the unity and the structure that this does. So the ideas are both fantastic. They're both different takes. Marcus Aurelius is rightly considered one of the best philosophers, Stoics, leaders of all time. Completely fairly so. But I'm probably going to be talking more about this one today. So this is more of a video on Letters from a Stoic. So, how did they come into my life? I have been collecting the Penguin Pocket hardback editions for a while, and I looked at the rest of the books in these editions, and these were 2 of them, and I thought, why not? That's really how it started. And so at the beginning of the year, I started reading Letters from a Stoic and was loving it. When in one of my lectures, we were talking about death anxiety as a transdiagnostic criteria, how many different disorders kind of all boil down to the patient expressing their fear of death in an unhealthy way. And I mentioned how, Stoicism talks a lot about fears of death. And my professor leans over and brings out a book which is a collected sayings of Seneca, specifically Seneca's book How to Die, again, not written by Seneca, but a collection of his writings on death. And the thing that was insane is that, the idea of, and my professor then goes on to say, I actually use Stoicism and this book by Seneca with patients. I actually show them this and help deal with death anxieties using Stoicism. It was an example in the wild I found completely by accident of applied philosophy. That never happens. That never happens. It's such a joke how philosophy is considered so abstract that it can never actually be relevant and is completely useless. And yet here it was, spontaneously in the field I want to go into and want to study. And so that obviously spurred me on, and I was already loving the book, and now I had a reason to hold on to it even tighter. And then, in a slightly less fortunate way, I had a family member pass away at the beginning of the year, and I lived with family, and obviously everyone took it hard and in different ways. And so I had these ideas presented to me in literature and in academia, and then in my personal life. And so it suddenly became very important to me, where understanding these things, I saw how hurtful and damaging they could be, and so actually thinking about these things could help a lot of people. And so it became very meaningful to me. But I should probably talk about what these ideas are. Stoicism as a school is quite different to other fields and schools of philosophy, in that its goal isn't to understand the universe or break down questions. It's really just a way of achieving contentness and living well. And so it's a fantastic start, especially in this format of letters. It's not some complicated thesis, it's just a guide to how maybe one should live. But it's also not crazy strict. It's not like some extreme forms of asceticism where it's like you have to sacrifice and give up everything you love in order to live well. It's not that extreme, but they are related in a way. Stoicism arose from one of the common beliefs in the ancient world, really, that humans were superior to animals. That is the base assumption, not coming from Stoicism. That was, Aristotle says that, Plato says that. It's just kind of a universally assumed thing. Even many people today think that. And the idea is, what separates us from animals? Well, we can all feel emotion. You can see a bull get angry, so no, it's not emotion that does it, but it must be our rationality, because humans can think and work things out and solve puzzles. So rationality must be the special thing. And if humans are better than animals, then the more human we can be, the better we will be. So we should focus on the human stuff, i.e. rationality. That's the base assumption. And again, the base assumption of so many different schools of philosophy, but the way that Stoics approach it, rather than focusing on being more rational, it focuses on being less emotional. As in, not allowing your emotions to control you and who you are. There are different extremes to this, where Aurelius says, emotions are natural, they're going to be part of you, of course you should feel them and recognize them and accept them, you just shouldn't let them control you, they shouldn't be making your decisions for you, but they are a part of you. Meanwhile, Seneca goes a bit more extreme and says, no, we should try to be getting rid of emotions as much as possible. Ultimately, how extreme you take it doesn't really matter, the teachings are the same. What this all boils down to, according to Seneca, is nature. That we need to accept the facts of life and just obey nature and not try to put our own things on it. And so one of the examples I've already mentioned of this, and I think talking about these examples is the best way of getting at these beliefs, is death. Death is a fact. Death is a fact of life, where I and everyone I love and everything I love will perish and cease to be. Everything is temporary. And running away from that and trying to let the fear of that guide how you live is a terrible idea. It's going to fail, because ultimately it's the truth. It's something you can't run away from, and at one point will get you. But that doesn't mean live in terror. That doesn't mean accept and think about it all the time in some macabre, grotesque way. Not at all. It's in fact quite the opposite, where it's nothing to be afraid of at all. Where, if you actually think about what death is, there's actually a great quote. Seneca is in the habit of quoting a bunch of people who weren't even Stoics, but just who have views that kind of line up with the Stoic view, and so I'm going to feel no guilt at all quoting Mark Twain here, because I do think this quote really fits in with Stoicism. I say quote, I should say paraphrase, because I can't remember quotes word for word. The quote is, I was dead for billions of years before I was born, and it never troubled me. And the same goes for after you're dead. There is no actual experience of death. Once you are dead, you cannot think, you cannot be, there is nothing you can fear. So there's no state, there's no actual event to fear. Whilst you are alive, you're alive. You're not dead, you're fearing something that hasn't happened yet. And that's, again, one of the big views. If you fear something that hasn't happened yet, you're fearing twice as much as you need to. Fear and be afraid when it's appropriate to be afraid, but if there's nothing yet to be afraid of, if the thing still lies in the future, then you are actually putting more suffering onto yourself than need be. And that goes for death. What are you fearing from death? There's no actual event. Death just happens. It's not something that causes immense fear or suffering. It's just a change of state, which we've already been through in one direction. Perhaps you're saying that, oh, but I'm losing my life. But the issue is that's the wrong way to think about it, because you are your life. It's more that the world is losing you. So there's no reason for you personally to be afraid, because you're not losing anything, you're just leaving. But there's so much more discussions, and far better than ever I could in these books, about the death of oneself and preparing for one's own death. And Seneca kind of had to be serious about it. He actually ended up being ordered by Nero to kill himself, as was a common punishment in ancient Rome, and he went through with it. But I think it's even more interesting when it talks about the loss of others, which I'll actually just read something from the book. The wise man will still consider what is valuable in life to be something wholly confined to his inner self. He will repeat the words of Stilbo, when his hometown was captured and he emerged from the general conflagration, his children lost, his wife lost, alone and nonetheless a happy man, and was questioned by Demetrius. Asked by this man, known for the destruction he dealt out to towns as Demetrius the city sacker, whether he had lost anything, he replied, I have all my valuables with me. There was an active and courageous man, victorious over the very victory of the enemy. I have lost, he said, nothing. He made Demetrius wonder whether he had won a victory after all. All my possessions, he said, are with me. Meaning by this the qualities of a just, a good, and an enlightened character. So, someone might immediately think this is so barbaric and narcissistic, he's lost his family and he says he hasn't lost anything. But the point he is making is that they were never his. All one really has is themselves. Anything else, whilst you can so totally value the relationships with them and hold precious the intertwining of your lives with other people, ultimately you're not entitled to them, you don't own them, and therefore you can never lose them. They aren't yours to lose. There's another quote in this. If it is something you can lose, it was never yours to begin with. All the things that are truly yours, you cannot lose. And that's why things like your good character, your sense of justice, those are things that cannot be taken away by anyone else. And there's so much in that to get into, but the first off is, people may die in my life, I may lose others, but I haven't actually lost anything. I was never entitled to a future with them. I never own the future with them. All I have is the experience with them in the present and the experiences I had in the past, and they're there forever. No one's taking them from me. It's not that there hasn't been massive injustice committed, it's that he cannot say he has lost anything because he acknowledges that they were never truly his. And this goes into this other view, which I find very important, that you should not do anything for the opinions of others, and that if there is an option to do something just and good that may make you seem or be described as less good by others, you should still do it, because ultimately whether you're just or good is an internal characteristic, not something decided on by the rest of the world. And so prioritizing the opinions of others over what you know to be the right thing to do will always lead to bad. Like, this is why Seneca is against extravagance. And it all rests on this idea that everything that's valuable is with me. Focusing on material goods is silly and pointless because they're never mine in the first place. So focusing your entire life and energy on owning things which you can never really own is a complete waste. And again, this teaching does go into the idea of minimalism and anti-materialism and the fact that you should find a way to be content with what little you have. And that is what I find so appealing and what I love so much about Stoicism. Like, there's another quote, I believe this is from Epictetus, saying, wealth is not having many possessions, but having few wants. What that quote is saying is that it doesn't matter how much money I have, if I'm always wanting more, then I'll never have enough. It's actually a good quote from Epicurus, and even though Epicurus was not at all a Stoic, he's actually quoted a lot by Seneca, who just generally had the idea of, if you say something that fits with my views, I'm going to use it. I don't care what you think of Stoicism. If this view fits in with the Stoic view, I'm just going to take it, and I really like that. And one of the quotes from Epicurus I like, which I do think fits very well in Stoicism, is, nothing is sufficient for the one who finds sufficiency too little. It's that idea, if enough is never enough, you're never going to be happy. So with this, there seem to be posed two options. Either you can continuously try to hoard more and more wealth and buy more and more things, but ultimately, if your want can never be checked and you will always be wanting more, you will never reach a point of satisfaction and happiness. The second option is instead to train yourself to have few wants. If I can have fewer and fewer wants and not increase the number of wants I have, that's a goal I can actually reach. In terms of goals, and there's a common phrase which I really like, of moving the goalposts, where if you're constantly getting more but also continuously wanting more, the goalposts are moving as much as you do. They might even be getting further away. That's one option. Or you can move the goalposts far closer to you, keep them there, and then you have a very short walk to happiness. And all of this is why I love Stoicism, because this is what I was talking about at the beginning. The point is to live well and to be content. And so the idea is, you want to be happy? Want less. If you want less and are happy with less, then you're happy. It's achievable. This is how you can actually achieve your goals. It's so applicable. And so that's why there are things against extravagance. There's also things against travel, saying, if you're just trying to get away from your problems, but your problems are how you're viewing things and your thoughts and your mind, then you can never really fix anything. You have to focus within, and it's very much this personal approach to the world. But I think I'm verging on the point of lecture, and so I'm going to try to stop kind of the discussion of the deeper Stoic teachings there. But this is why I love it. It's the idea of take the things that you know to be true, take the things you're afraid of, and really look at them and say, are they worth fearing? Look at your goals and think, are they actually achievable? And if not, how can you change that? And if you can control your emotions and your wants, if you can challenge your fear, your greed, you can actually make living a good life very easy. And it very much flies in the face of, it's very anti-materialism, very anti-capitalism, and that very much fits with my own worldviews. And obviously I don't believe in an afterlife, and so that's why it speaks to me. And so this way of thinking might appeal to me far more than others, but I love it. I really do love it. The thing to keep in mind is that what I'm talking about here really are books. This book, and also Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which I feel guilty for sidelining such a brilliant work, but these are the words of men who lived 2,000 years ago, and yet they are still completely affecting people today. They are directly changing how I view the world and how I live my life. They have given me help, are helping people who are suffering in real, meaningful ways, which is just such a powerful thing. It just shows the power of words, the power of books, the power of literature. And I think that's beautiful. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you got a little look into Stoicism and kind of the views that it talks about and how they might be helpful. And if you are finding yourself being challenged by life to find the things that you want to do to reach your goals, or that you're terribly afraid of something that lies in your future, I would definitely give these a read, because they give good advice and good ways to look at these things to avoid those kind of pits of despair. And knowing that you can be afraid, you can have those fears, emotions are going to happen. The important thing is to accept them and to have them at the appropriate point. Don't be afraid of fear. Don't be afraid of something that's not going to happen. Don't be afraid of something that hasn't happened yet, that might not even happen. If something terrible happens, then is the time to be afraid. Until then, just live. You don't know the future. The past is already gone. All you have is the present. And as long as you have a present, then you always have something, and you always have yourself. Don't look to others to give you things that they can't. It's not that others don't want to give you self-worth and self-meaning and just character, it's that they physically can't. There is always going to be a boundary there, and you can only access those things and do that work yourself. And to live well, maybe you should. That's what I'm trying to work on, and I think these books are helping me a lot in that. And they mean a lot to me. And so thank you very much for listening. I hope I didn't bore you, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this if you feel like it. Look up these books. These books you can get for free. Because they're 2,000 years old, there are completely free versions of these texts online. I'll actually leave copies of them in the description below, because they are just fantastic and are really worth the read. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.